good evening. We'll call the meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Can we have a roll call?
Chair Aaron Todd. Vice Chair Cameron Carizales.
Here.
Commissioner Gary Cushing.
Here.
Commissioner Jamie Labor.
Here.
Commissioner Miguel Magallanes.
Present.
All right, moving on. Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? All right, moving on, oral communication. This is an opportunity for citizens presentations or comments not related to agenda items, but within the responsibility of the Fillmore Planning Commission. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes. Do we have anyone from the public? All right, moving on, consent calendar, item 4A. Do we have any comments?
Yeah, so on the minutes from the September 20th meeting, I wanted to make a correction on item 5, the consent calendar. It shows me as absent, and I was present. It does show in the ayes that I was an aye vote, but it shows absent. So I would like to strike that absent to show that I was here.
Do we have a motion to approve with the correction to item 5A, striking Commissioner Jamie from the absent column? Do I have a second?
Yeah, second.
All in favor? Say
Aye.
Aye.
All oppose? All right. All right, moving on now to item 5A, consideration of resolution recommending zoning ordinance amendment 23-01, an ordinance to amend Fillmore Municipal Code Section 6.04.0417 to update density bonus standards for consistency with state law and finding of SECA exemption. Staff have a presentation?
This is the presentation that I'll be doing. And if you all don't mind, I'll do the presentation from right here, but if anyone prefers, I can stand up here. So what this ordinance is going to do is make some changes to the Fillmore Municipal Code section to be consistent with state density bonus law. State density bonus law, like accessory dwelling unit law, is something that gets updated at the state level pretty frequently. It seems like about every year there's updates to either accessory dwelling unit law or density bonus law. And so when those updates in the state laws are made, what we do is make changes to the Fillmore Municipal Code to be consistent with what the changes in state law are, and then bring those to the Planning Commission, and then eventually they go to the City Council. So some of the updates that are made to the density bonus law here are fairly technical. I'll go over kind of the big picture changes that are being made. But first, just to give an overview on the concept of density bonus law, it's basically an incentive that's required at the state level. It's required for all cities in California to do this. And basically the idea is that if a developer proposes a housing development, and as part of that housing development, they agree to provide a certain percentage of affordable units, they're able to get density incentives and other development standard reductions, essentially in exchange for providing those affordable units. And the more affordable units there are, and the more units there are in terms of volume, the more incentives and more density they get out of a project. So basically it's a trade-off, and it's a way to incentivize developers to provide housing projects with affordable units. So there's a state law that has some pretty detailed requirements that cities have to follow, and cities are required to adopt ordinances that have the state laws. And so what the city ordinance does is it's very similar in language to the state law. The idea is to try to be consistent. And then when staff is reviewing projects, doesn't have to be a lot of refer back between state law and the city's code because they're effectively the same. So these new laws that we're making changes to the municipal code for became effective at the beginning of this year. They're not the type of situations that, in my experience anyway, have come up very frequently, and as far as I'm aware, there haven't been like questions about these items so far, but in any case, they're already in state law, so we're making changes to the Fillmore Municipal Code. So there are 2 assembly bills, and I'll go through the discussion that way. There's Assembly Bill 2334 and Assembly Bill 682. So first for 2334, and this is page 2 of the staff report. I'm just going to kind of go through in the same order as the staff report. Currently, under state density bonus law, if a development or a housing project that proposes to include affordable housing units and triggers this density bonus law, if it's located next to, the term is a major transit stop, that's the term is used in state law, they're given an extra 33 feet, up to extra 33 feet in height or 3 stories, or, and that there's no density control that the city can impose. So that's the current law. What this new law does is requires cities that qualify as a very low vehicle travel area, so that's a defined term in state law, that they're subject to that same requirement. So additional height and no density that can be imposed. So that's what AB 2334 would do. It essentially just adds, in addition to that major transit stop requirement or like extra incentive that's already there, it makes that same incentive apply to cities that are very low vehicle travel areas. The definition is in section A1 and under letter B, how that term is defined. It's a very technical definition. And when I was going through looking at making the amendments to the code and figuring out how this would work in the city, I tried to see if there was any information available as to like online as to whether the city would meet that definition or not, because that's really the critical thing. If the city doesn't meet that definition, this doesn't apply at all, even though it's in state law. I don't think, just based on like where Fillmore is located, and I would guess people in Fillmore tend to travel more by car than most people in Ventura County and Santa Clarita. But I don't know that for sure. So my guess is that that definition, that the city would not meet that definition. But I've not done an analysis personally. I don't think staff has done either. And what the technical definition is of that term is where the existing residential development generates vehicle miles traveled per capita that is below 85% of either regional vehicle miles traveled per capita or city vehicle miles traveled per capita. So it's a very dense technical definition, but the idea, big picture, is for cities that have people that aren't taking a lot of car trips, aren't generating a lot of vehicle miles traveled, that the developers have that extra incentive available to them. So in effect, it's kind of like being near a major transit stop, with the idea being that dense housing development to be clustered in places where people don't have cars, have transit available. Another requirement in AB 2334, so what I just went through is the main one. The other requirement is that it makes cities do the maximum allowable residential density calculation to be determined using dwelling units per acre adopted by the local agency through zoning ordinance, specific plan, or land use element of the general plan. The city's municipal code already uses that metric. So this is something that's being built into the city's code and density bonus law, but the city already uses that standard, so it doesn't impact the city at all. I skipped C there on page 2 of the staff report. It adds a minimum lot area per unit requirement to the list of development standards that developers can waive out of by providing affordable housing if it's requested by them. So those are probably the more substantive changes in state law compared to the next section, but basically the amendments to the code or text amendments to reflect those new laws. So the next section here is AB 682. And what this law did was add shared housing as a new category of housing development eligible for density bonus law. Currently, density bonus eligibility is for housing developments that are 5 units or more. And there was really no specification as to whether those units had to be individually, like all units having a bathroom, a kitchen, that type of thing, dining area. This new definition, shared housing, sort of expands that a bit to say that if there's a housing development where there's different units, but where there's shared common areas such as shared kitchen facilities or dining areas, those types of developments are also eligible for density bonus law. So the same rules as a typical unit would apply, but those, if there's a shared housing development, the city has to apply the state density bonus rules to that type of development too. And for those units, the city is prohibited from requiring any minimum unit size or minimum unit bedroom requirements that otherwise conflict with density bonus law. So that's the sort of second primary part, that it adds shared housing units to the types of projects that are eligible for density bonus. Just to give a quick, I won't go through the individual text amendments to the municipal code, but just, I suppose as a quick explanation of how this was done. Because this density bonus law is in a specific, or the city's density bonus requirements are in a section of the municipal code. It's not its own section, it's in 6040417. And so it was, instead of doing these sort of piecemeal, and since there are a lot of like little tweaks, which you can see by the bolded text and strike through if you just flip through the pages, it was easier just to amend the whole section of the code and to say that this is what the changes are in bold and strike through. And so a lot of this language that's there, that's just kind of in normal text with these definitions, that's existing text in the city's density bonus requirements that are not changing. It's the stuff that's in strike through and bold that's changing. Typically with ordinances, this is a very long ordinance. It ends up being 37 pages, I think, total. Typically what we try to do is break them into sort of smaller bite sizes so it doesn't end up being such a long document. For this, it was just easier to see the changes in the context of the whole density bonus section. So that's why we did it this way. But anyway, I thought I'd give that explanation since if you're comparing this to other ordinances, they're usually not this long and we're not like repeating entire gigantic sections of the code. It was just for this particular one, since there were kind of a lot of small changes and the numbering was very complicated, it was easier to do this way. So that's my presentation. I'll do my best to answer any questions if there are any. Sure.
When you talk about they get an additional 33 feet?
It's so that is I've not researched that. I was looking at that before the meeting exactly. How the way that that's worded in the code. I'm going to try to find the page number for you. Essentially the answer to that is what's in the city's code is exactly what's in the state law. So I think it says up to, it's sort of confusingly worded. I'm going to try to find
Does it
that.
sound like they get an extra 33 feet, so
Right.
that'd make a 4-story building?
Right.
Right?
Right. It's confusing. It's funny that you asked about that, because when I was going through this preparing, I thought, wow, that sounds weird. Is that like really right? And that wording is exactly what's in the state law. The intention might be for it just to be up to 3 feet, but it's not something that I've researched independently. So I don't know. I do know, I did confirm that the wording that's in the code is what's in the state law. But I agree with you that and there's also like discrepancy. Is it?
Is it 33 or is it 44?
Yeah, right. If you don't mind, give me 1 minute and I'll try to find where that language is.
So what that means, in the downtown specific plan, the downtown specific plan permits 3-story structures on corner lots, and at middle of the block, they can go 3 stories. And we do have some that are 3 stories. So I think I hear you say, in the downtown area where we have 3 stories, you can add an additional 3 stories.
So what this would be, this is for major transit stop, where there's a major transit
Where,
stop.
when you're within a quarter mile of a major transit stop, we have a bus stop where buses come once in the morning and once in the evening, and that is not a major transit stop.
That's, when we've looked at this before, there's different definitions under ADU law and this density bonus law for major transit stop. The way that it's been defined previously, I think the bus thoroughfares had to be every 15 minutes, or it was like a train stop. And so I don't believe the city meets that definition. And so the same thing with the very low vehicle travel area. I don't think that actually would apply to the city, but it's possible. I've not actually done the analysis, and I don't even know that definition is sort of vaguely worded, so I don't know if that's something staff would have to get from Ventura County to find out if there's any cities that meet that.
So we're keeping the language because we're being consistent with the state, but it really doesn't apply because we don't have the standard of a mass transit stop.
Right, or but at such time that the city did meet that definition of a major transit stop, or did qualify as a very low vehicle travel
And
area.
a very low travel area is just where there's few vehicles because people are relying upon walking. It's a very high dense area, and they walk from one building to another.
That's the.
And Fillmore, we travel everywhere by car. So if you want to go to Santa Creta, you want to go to Moore Park, you want to go to Ojai, you're going to be driving.
So, and because of that, just my guess would be that people in Fillmore tend to drive more than like
Yeah.
the average, person in this area. So
Because
I
we're not Sacramento, we're not San
Right.
Francisco, and we're not downtown Los Angeles.
there's actually not page numbers, but I can read. So the way that sentence reads, though, getting to the question, if the project is located within 1/2 mile of a major transit stop or very low vehicle travel area, the applicant shall also receive a height increase of up to 3 additional stories or 33 feet. So it's up to 3 additional stories or 33, or it says or 33 feet. I would interpret that to mean 33 additional feet, but I don't know if that's the correct interpretation. It could also be read to mean just 33 feet. But in any case, I don't think that would apply here anyway. But good question. It's funny you asked that because I had just been looking at that.
Any more questions? We open it for, we don't have any public speakers.
So,
You might want to open it up to see if there are any public comments.
Okay, so at this time, we'll open the public hearing for public comment. We don't have any present, so we will close the public hearing. Do we have a motion to adapt Planning Commission Resolution 23-1 1042, recommending city council introduce and adopt a city council ordinance to update the city's density bonus regulations consistent with state law requirements and finding of exemption from SECA.
Before you do the motion, we might want to see if there's any discussion between the commissioners.
Sorry, it's mosquito. Sorry.
No. Good.
Sorry.
Then I'll make a motion to adopt the Planning Commission Resolution 23-1042, Attachment 1, recommending the City Council to introduce and adopt a City Council ordinance to update the city's density bonus regulation consistent with state law requirements and findings of exemption from CEQA.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All that oppose? All right, passes 4-0. All right, moving on to item 5B. Consideration of resolution recommending zoning ordinance amendment 23-02 and ordinance 23-956, amend Fillmore Municipal Code Sections 6.04.04, 6.04.08, 6.04.12, and 6.04.96 to clarify existing regulatory requirements and add new regulatory requirements for self-storage and recreational vehicle storage facilities within the city limits and finding of SECA exemption. Staff ever?
Thank you. Good evening, Vice Chair Cameron and Planning Commission, City of Fillmore. This is zoning ordinance amendment 2302, City Ordinance 23956. That's a draft ordinance thus far. It does not become an official ordinance until it goes through City Council. So your recommendation tonight is to City Council. It's not the final decision. It's regarding self-storage facilities and RV storage facilities. I'm going to take you through the current zones that have these types of facilities allowed, BP, MPD zones. I'll show you what the existing and proposed related facilities are in the city. We had a moratorium, you may recall, on RV or self-storage facilities. We'll look at some factors staff considered in reviewing these. We'll summarize the zone text amendments for you, and we'll give you what the CEQA exemption is and our staff recommendations, of course, at the end. Okay. Starting with the BP and MPD zones, these two zones are currently where we would allow self-storage facilities to come into were one to apply. The BP zones, 1 and 2, explicitly have what is being termed mini storage in those zones. It's a little bit ambiguous because we don't have a definition for mini storage, but anyway, it's called out in those two zones. And then the MPD zone has something called storage. And then in addition to that, it has something called mini storage. So we're just trying to clarify, how do we interpret this and where is in the city's interests to actually have these types of uses. And it also shows up in the residential zone, so we clean that up as well. Currently, we have those facilities shown in red here. Those are existing storage facilities. It's sort of a combination, hodgepodge of miscellaneous RV, recreation vehicles / storage, and buildings with storage inside. The yellow is showing where we've had recent inquiries. There's been a lot of inquiries over the year, but we've had a very recent uptick in them. And this summarizes kind of the general areas here. Out of the 6 that we looked at existing, it's a total of 30.82 acres over the entire city, which is quite large average of 5.14 as compared to, like, say, Camarillo that we looked at, where their average is in the low 3s. And then we've recently had a flurry of calls, and I understand one was about a year or so ago up in the North Fillmore specific plan area, shown in yellow there. One was along Santa Clara Street near 126, down by the gas station. And one was down by E Street in the business park, and that's quite large, 23.5 acres. So that would come close to doubling the total amount of storage in the city. And you can kind of see when you drive into the city, predominantly coming from east to west, it's quite substantial when you look out at all of the RV storage that we have existing south of the highway, plus the new one that's coming in that's under construction today. That's close to 12 acres on the north side of the highway. So that's kind of our gateway to the city right now, is looking like a lot of RV storage. So that was kind of one of the things that caused us to take a closer look at this. So the moratorium, as I mentioned, that was enacted just a few months back. It came across your desk, and then City Council approved. It was for a 45-day emergency ordinance initially. City Council approved an additional 10 months and 15 days, which I believe takes us out to March or May.
May.
It's
I forget
May
the exact
something.
End of May.
May something. So we're getting this in as early as possible for everybody's consideration. City Council could extend it again for an additional 1 year when May comes around if we haven't made a decision on this. Some of the things that staff looked at and considered in researching and contacting other cities, and just doing an overall evaluation of these, is that they're largely asphalt parking lots. And in a lot of cases here in Fillmore, you'll notice they're just dirt gravel. So there are really no improvements even surrounding them. There's no sidewalks. There's little to no landscaping. It hardly looks like they move. The RVs hardly look like they're coming in and out. So we don't have a clear picture on whose RVs are they. Are they Fillmore residents' RVs? Are they people from out of town? They just kind of add this sort of dead-end look to the blocks when you see them. There's little to no activity. We have very limited land resources in Fillmore, and that's a whole nother topic, but you may have heard of things like SOAR or the city urban restriction boundary. It's very, very challenging to add any new lands to the city's limits. So we're really left with what you see today for the most part. So that's another factor. They don't offer a lot of employment. Looking at U.S. labor statistics, they assign it about a 3.5 employees. I would guess it's a little bit lower than that. There might be a part-time person there at the desk once in a while, but given the modernization, the automation of everything, it almost seems like you don't need them manned at all. Everything's a fob card these days. You pay online. So we think the employment is very, very low relative to the land area ratio. There's other impacts that could occur with these, with vehicles being stored and cars coming in and out, losing track of what's on the site. And so we felt that this trend, this uptick that we're seeing, and we look at the expanse of these on a map, is that really what the city's land use goals are here? Is that what we want Fillmore to look like? And so we're kind of looked at the general plan elements and found that doesn't seem to be consistent with the city's objectives to have a prosperous economy and a diverse economy, and also obviously add employment opportunities. So some of the zone changes, as I said, really some of it's a cleaning up of the text. It's not a big sweeping overhaul at all. It's very precise, minor wording changes. We've had various things show up like storage, mini storage, and recreational vehicles. So we clean it up by eliminating mini storage, since there is no such definition. And that's a bit of a dated term. So we now would like to just call it self-storage. That's one that everybody seems to recognize. It's consistent with other areas. So we add a definition of that. We eliminate the mini storage references. And then RV storage was never really a use in our use matrix. We defined what's a recreational vehicle, but recreational vehicle storage is really not a use. It should be deemed more of an accessory use. So you don't have a primary recreational vehicle, but it could be a part of what we would call now self-storage. And in our development standards for self-storage, we've now allowed for RV storage, whereas it was ambiguous as to whether you could even allow RV storage under some general definition of storage. I know I'm using that word a lot, but now we've now added a standard for RV storage. So now it's clear that it's allowed under certain specifications. And it would be allowed under self-storage. Self-storage gives you, the buildings with the access garages, and we've allowed in this change up to 50% of the land area to be for recreational vehicles as well. As compared to some other places like in the Ventura County, they only allow up to 30% RV storage as a component of self-storage. So we've suggested 50%, seems like a reasonable number. It's consistent with the current operator today, and we thought that sounded like a good compromise. The changes allow for a recreational vehicle to be stored in the rural residential zone. So anybody with a single-family house up in the rural area, sure, you could store your own RV on site. It didn't used to allow for that. This change would allow for that. It also eliminates this use that's called a communal storage facility. It seems to be a bit dated as well. There was a time when residential developers may have a development with an HOA that would have an opportunity for communal recreational vehicle storage. And you could imagine this would pertain to very high-end housing where people might come in and buy homes and they have RVs. And so the developer would look at actually having their own private sort of communal RV storage. But today, the value of homes wouldn't appeal to a developer today because a residential lot would not be worthwhile to park RVs on. You'd want to build a house on it. Right? So it's kind of a different economy today. It's never been proposed in this city. We're just going to wipe it out. We're just going to get rid of it. Well, we won't see it. Okay, but we do maintain the ability for a single-family homeowner to put their own RV on their own property today, as they can today. The amendments clarify that you can't have somebody living in the RV. You can have a visitor come and stay in an RV in front of your property with a special permit, and there's a time frame associated with that. We changed the permitting for self-storage in the industrial zone to be a conditional use permit as opposed to a development permit. It seems to be better managed as a use because self-storage may not necessarily include construction. So it's a better fit to be a conditional use permit for management. And I repeated some of these on this slide, but I talked about the 50%, the conditional use permit. It also, under the MPD zone, we had a minimum lot requirement of 85,000 square feet. We switched that to just be a maximum of 85,000 square feet, and that's a 1.95 acre. So that would still allow it to occur. It just wouldn't be a sort of a massive sea of self-storage, but there would be some component of it, theoretically hoping that we could still fulfill the needs of residents of Fillmore. And it may be too small to appeal to the region. We also added a criteria that would prohibit self-storage within 500 feet of State Route 126 and within 1,000 feet of another self-storage facility. The reason we would put that along State Route 126 is for the aforementioned reasons. When you come into town, you're looking at recreational vehicle storage today, and this 126 corridor has opportunities for commercial and tax revenue generating exchanges. There's an uptick in residents such as Newhall and Santa Paula, and there's more traffic coming down the highway. And the vision for the city of Fillmore, as is represented in all of our approved land use documents, is to capture the 126 as our tax revenue to support the city's maintenance, right? So RV storage doesn't seem to fit that goal that's in our general plan land use element. And this is also consistent with what Thousand Oaks recently adopted as well. And Camarillo looked at the same thing. They're seeing these things pop up in what was deemed to be their commercial corridor, their money generating corridor. So they've added similar restrictions. Ours is less. Other cities have added 1,000 feet. We used 500 feet. and we didn't use any other arterials in the city. We just did 500 feet from 126. Some other cities also are requiring that you do mixed use. If you're going to have self-storage, you have to have a mixed use component on the ground floor facing a street. We didn't add that either. We just don't seem to have a large amount of arterial streets that would support something like that. So it just didn't seem to apply as much here. And then finally, in the BP1 and BP2 zones, it just completely eliminates what we call the mini storage from that zone, because that is intended to be more of an office. It does still allow warehousing. So a warehousing project that's coming in there could have, a massive warehousing operation, but they couldn't carve it up into smaller storage. Under the California Environmental Quality Act, the activity would not result in foreseeable physical changes to the environment. Therefore, we found that it is categorically exempt from CEQA. Staff's recommendation tonight is conduct this public hearing and accept any public comments. Adopt Planning Commission Resolution 231045, recommending City Council adopt Zoning Ordinance Amendment 2302 and Ordinance 23956, amending the Fillmore Municipal Code to clarify existing regulatory requirements and add new regulatory requirements for self-storage and recreational vehicles. And I'm available to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Yes.
Okay, Brian, on the new one that is under construction right now,
Yes.
do you know how many RV parking spaces they're gonna have?
It's around 400,
400?
approaching 400.
And do you know how many are in the city right now?
Total spaces, I don't know total spaces, but I would say it's at least doubling total spaces,
Okay, so we might have existing 400 right now? And then we go to,
or a bit less, yeah, something like that.
okay,
Something in that neighborhood. It might be in the 360 that the new one's adding, somewhere in that neighborhood.
okay. Because I know when I moved to Fillmore, I couldn't find a spot available.
Right.
And then I finally got into a space because it is very tight. The one on the coming into 126, now these are just, there's no applications for those, right? The
No.
ones in yellow?
No, because of
Those are just indication of interest or something?
because of the moratorium. Were it not for the moratorium, they seem like serious applicants.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this changes doesn't affect any current RV
It really
storage.
materially doesn't affect the current operations,
Okay.
but it does render them non-conforming. So as non-conforming, they won't be able to expand.
Okay.
That's really all it is. There's not a lot of changes that happen with these, but we would allow them to continue as is. If they were ever to abandon it or cease operations over 90 days or 120 days, Kevin can clarify, then it's considered abandoned, and then it's no longer allowed use. Now you got to develop it with something that is consistent with our land use documents.
Okay, so if they wanted to expand, could they come up with new standards?
Anybody could apply to amend our codes, but no is
Okay.
the short answer.
Okay, that's okay, you can give short answers.
Yeah.
85,000 square feet, 1.95 acres. Is that big enough for somebody to build a storage facility and be profitable with that?
Possibly. I don't know the market itself well enough,
Okay.
but that is in the range of what other cities are doing. And again, we're trying to look at, as a smaller city, what really are our demands. And when you start to Google storage and RV storage, the RV storage advertising in Fillmore is not just advertising Fillmore, it's advertising the region, Castaic through probably Santa Barbara, right? Because there's other cities aren't approving these as much either. In Moore Park recently, a conditional use permit, the city did not renew. It was allowed to expire. Those tenants are being told, well, just come out to Fillmore. So it's hard to know really without getting a hold of proprietary information where all of these customers are coming from. But that was kind of the impetus here, was to say, hey, let's slow this down a little bit. What is this? What is our market here? Are we becoming the storage capital of the region? Because
Maybe our new logo.
it doesn't equate. It doesn't equate. If you look at all those acreage versus our population versus how many in our population actually own RV vehicles versus also how many of those people who own RV storage or RV vehicles don't have the opportunity to store it on their own property.
Well, like the new development we're looking at, there's no way anybody could store an RV on those lots because they're too small.
Up at the creek side?
Yeah,
Correct.
so, and on communal, the mobile home park here doesn't have a communal RV storage? Huh? Okay, so,
El Dorado Mobile Home Park?
Yeah.
Yes, it does have one.
It has a separate RV storage?
Yes.
Okay, and that's governed under state law, mobile home parks are, so they don't fall within our criteria.
okay, because I was going to say, I've seen where a lot of mobile home parks have them because there's no way they can do it, and some of them are over 55 parks, which would have RVs.
Sure. That's important, that's an important consideration, though. We probably need to confirm with our legal office that any of these changes aren't going to affect them.
Okay.
I don't think it would.
I think for existing mobile home parks, I think it'd be the same principle
Yeah.
where you wouldn't be allowed to expand, but if it's a legal existing use, even if they're non-conforming, they're allowed to continue with the existing.
Unless they close it down and then they'd
Correct.
have to redo it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't, sometimes there are state laws applicable
Right.
to mobile home parks and
Right.
recreational vehicle parks. And so I don't know, it's possible that something like this could be preempted. I'm not aware of that requirement, so would assume that this would apply to them. But that is kind of a highly regulated industry, so it's possible there's something special to mobile home parks or
Yeah.
recreational.
Okay, those are the
vehicle
questions.
And on the 85,000 square foot thing, that's a great question because that takes really understanding the business. Where our criteria comes in is you have 50% of it would be self-storage, so you could have 2 stories of self-storage garages types, and that would have a broader range of customers, not just RV parking. And then half of that could be RV parking, so it's kind of more accessory to the primary, which is the self-storage.
So 85,000 square feet would be the footprint, not necessarily counting, like if they had a 2-story, that doesn't impact the 85,000?
That's correct. It's
So actually,
85,000.
they could be getting more if they go 2 stories.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so that's the square foot of the land.
Okay.
But you can get efficient within how you design it.
Okay.
And sometimes it opens up other opportunities for people they didn't know about, when they go to self-storage.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I had a question about the 500 feet from 126.
Yeah.
With not seeing the zoning map, I don't know where the BP1 and BP2s are in MPD zones. But just wondering, does that even allow for any future RV or storage along the 126, or does that push it way in the back?
There would be no new self-storage on Highway 126.
Okay.
It would be the business park, which is this area down on the lower left.
Mhm.
I don't know if you can see my mouse, but I'm kind of circling that area here. You have the stop. We have a proposal on this parcel here, and then over here is in front of the wastewater treatment plant. So we would continue to have that property be available to businesses, other types of business. Hopefully, businesses that are going to employ people, and also add to the visual character of the city. So there would be no new RV storage, or I should say, self-storage.
Okay.
But obviously, you'll see the 12-acre pop up here pretty shortly. Yeah. You're gonna be, when you come into town from east to west, you're gonna be looking at storage on both sides of the highway for quite a ways. And so we didn't want to see that happen on the west side as well.
Yeah, having a
Or,
bunch of land.
yeah,
on the
or
south
offer
side.
that as a concern that staff is foreseeing to you folks, the decision makers. If that's something you want to see on that side of town, that's your decision. Yeah. I shouldn't say I'm deciding that.
And just to, I think Gary already asked the question, you might have already answered it. There are no applicants or were no applicants prior to this that got placed on hold or anything like that while this was being figured out?
There were inquiries, calls and inquiries. I don't, to my knowledge, I haven't spoken with all of those people, but the moratorium preempted any new applications, so no official applications could be accepted.
But I want to be clear, I worked with an applicant, and they're in the audience. I worked with them for 1 year. The day they were submitting the application is the day staff presented to the city council a moratorium. So although we didn't receive the application, they've been working on it for 1 year, and they believe it's a completed application. They had prepared plans, fees, and their own environmental review. So we haven't received it, but they were working on it for 1 year.
Is
Yes.
that represented in one of the yellow boxes?
Yeah, that would be this yellow box up here at the top. And I don't know what their plan is, but I kind of generally put a yellow polygon there. I think it represents somewhere around 2.5 acres-ish. You know, it would be a compilation of various lots up there that they would have to assemble.
You're talking about North Fillmore.
Yeah, if
Yellow
you see
at the
this, yeah, this kind of little L shape up there in the north. And you have an existing one there in red.
Is that an old one at the top there in red?
Yeah.
So it's probably got chain link.
It's a
fence.
pre-existing non-conforming. There's no improvements associated with it. Yeah. So, and again, that's your route to get into your new homes. So routes to get in new homes affect property values as well. So there's a lot of things to consider.
So this would deem that potential applicant, they would not be able to move forward with that location?
With that red lot there, it would be precluded because of the 1,000-foot criteria. You can't have another one within 1,000 feet of another self-storage facility.
Is that going to be RV or just?
I'm not sure.
Well, the applicants during the public comment period will explain this to us.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember. I saw the site plan only once for about 5 minutes.
The issue we had in our ordinance, as I mentioned, was we don't have something called RV storage as a use. There's no permit for something called RV storage. It's just sort of morphed into these RVs showing up on properties, but it's not a specific use. So that's why when we looked at this, we added RV storage as that it could be a component of self-storage.
Any more questions? All right, at this time, we will open the public hearing for public comments. Have anyone? Speakers? All right,
Are there speaker cards?
no speaker cards?
No.
All right, we'll close the public hearing. The planning commission, have any items for discussion?
Yeah, I think it's visually and financially, I think for the city it's not good to have RVs stored there. I guess business-wise, I guess it makes sense, but I don't know if, I think restaurants or retail would make more sense on the highway, since we get a lot of traffic going to the beach. But that's what I see.
Go ahead.
I mean, as being an RV owner, I'm very cognitive of there is a shortage, but with adding almost double what we already probably have in the city and adding that on, I think it's gonna go to alleviating the problem of storage for a while. I do like being off of 126 because, just to drive in and see a storage facility I think is the prettiest thing to do. Of course, these new ones will have landscaping and block walls and everything and probably look aesthetically, but there again, on retail, you know, you only have to build one style.
Yeah, my concern with the storage facilities on the east side and the west side, right along the highway, is those, like Brian was saying, that's our gateway to the city. That's what people notice when they drive into the city, and that's going to be what they remember. They're going to be going, oh, Fillmore, oh yeah, that's that place with the just storage everywhere. You know what I mean? That's the first impression anyone gets when they drive in the city. So if we could preserve the west side, and with the east side, it's already there, but on the west side, if we could,
Done deal.
yeah, if we could preserve that and make some, allow uses there that are, you know, visually better for our gateway, you know, as people are driving in the city, I think that would be better. And I think being able to have some revenue coming in for the city within that 126 corridor, I think that benefits the city, in my opinion, more than the storage does.
I agree. I agree with all your comments. I think right off 126, visually just coming in as a city and our goal to beautify the 126 and make it attractive to people coming to our city. RV on the 126 definitely does not achieve that. But I have some sensitivity to the potential applicant on the north Fillmore. Just hearing that they've got to the point of being ready to submit an application and then being stopped. You know, I'm sensitive to the financial costs that they probably invested to get to that point. And now this would deem that opportunity pretty much void. What's your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, okay, we vote this, it goes through the city, council says yes. Is there any way they could turn an application and ask for a variance on that? No?
No, it wouldn't qualify as a variance. You would have to suggest changes to the zoning text.
And then we go through this again?
Michael could correct me, but you could suggest some language changes that might allow them.
Variances are really for like geographically unique property or like parcels, or there's something, you know, like a gigantic rock on a part of property, so you're like cutting them a break on a setback. So it's really for like unique situations.
Yeah.
These requirements are going to be generally applicable citywide, so there's not, the variant situation wouldn't really ever come up. Particularly for use, variances tend to be too for, like I said, things like setbacks, or where you're trying to make it so other parcels are sort of allowed to do similar uses, is like the neighborhood, because of something that's like geographically unique or like a unique physical characteristic about that particular property.
But we could, but it is possible to have language in there that would allow them to proceed with an application, you said?
If it's possible to identify specific criteria that they can meet, that would be some direction you could provide us.
Okay.
But I would say too, to be mindful, so that's
Yeah.
absolutely an option, but also be mindful, these are like citywide requirements. This
Right.
isn't like one particular property that's at issue. It's
Yeah.
the whole city that these requirements apply
Yeah,
to.
I don't-
So I would keep that in mind.
I don't think we would ever write, you wouldn't write specific language into the law that applies to, you know, one particular person, because that would be probably unfair business practice, I would say. But if there's some criteria that you can think of that is in the benefit of the entire city-wide, and then there's an applicant out there that goes, oh, well, we can actually make an adjustment to meet that criteria, then it would be up to them to do that.
So looking at, I'm not sure what page this is, says 6 of 7 on the staff report. Subsection, it's number 6, subsection 6.04.0815. That's where it says, would be added to restrict self-storage from within 500 feet of State Route 126 and within 1,000 feet of another self-storage facility. So I think what you're thinking about is maybe modifying that 1,000 feet of another storage facility. What was the thought process, I guess, behind the 1,000 feet from another storage facility?
If you take a look at the aerial map that's on the computer screen, the concern was that entire block between Goodenough Road and Fifth Street and between A and B Street would become self-storage.
So if you squeeze the self-storage off the highway, that's going to put more pressure on the other areas to be self-storage. And so you would potentially end up with exacerbating it on what land you do have left in the north side.
Could
And again, yeah.
Could we say something, no more than 2?
That's something.
200?
No, I'm just saying no more than 2 self-storages.
Oh, adding, yeah.
Within 1,000 feet, that
That's certainly.
would limit
Yeah.
people from turning that whole area into
Yeah.
self-storage, but it would
Potentially in the future,
also
yeah.
be sensitive to a potential applicant that has invested time.
Good idea.
I can support that. I would support.
Well, I mean, we're a recommending body to the city council, so we could make that recommendation to the council.
No more than 2, so then that, the same could happen down here, right? I'm just
Can you
looking
put
at
the
the
map back
existing
up?
ones. Because we have 3 existing that are away from the 126.
Well, could we increase the distance off the 126? So that means, if you, I
Put
don't
it
know
at
what the
1,000?
distance is, what that distance is to.
Make both distances 1,000.
Yeah, because you'll never get anything next to
No.
here that won't meet the requirement. These, or you already have 2 within it, so you can't put in a third.
You're like the 2 in the middle of the city, you couldn't put it
Yeah,
in
But
the
you
those are
couldn't
those-
put it, because you already have 2 next to it, so a third wouldn't meet the requirement.
What specifies next to it? Like, I
Abutting.
can see the ones at the top of north
Common lot line.
plan,
It's abutting and adjacent.
but yeah, so these, I don't know if they're budding or adjacent, the ones in the center.
What I was going to
They're
suggest
not.
is once the planning commission sort of has a direction on the recommendation it would like to make to city council, what I would probably want to do is discuss with Kevin and Brian briefly to make sure we can kind of fine tune the wording, to sort of work through that exact issue, to make sure we're coming up with like some clear language in the code and a clear recommendation to council on that. Because that is a practical consideration when staff gets these types of applications. If the code just said next to that, that's a real issue. How is that defined? And you, to the extent you can, you try to build in as much specificity as you can to the.
How big is that parcel up there? Does it meet the criteria of 1.95 acres?
Which, the red square there?
No, not the red
Or
one, the yellow one we're talking about.
I can't remember.
The yellow on the highway there?
No, not in the highway, the one we're just talking about in
Good enough, an
in
8.
North Fillmore, how big is that?
Oh, I believe it comes, I think it's around 2.5 acre, but again, there's about 4 or 5 lots in there, and I think they would be assembling 4 of those. That
So
polygon's
that would
not
go over
correct.
the 1.95,
And it-
85,000 square feet too.
Well, yeah, it's roughly, I think if you were to compile those, it's around 2.5 acres, so maybe they would eliminate one of the lots and just do 3 of the lots, something like that. I don't know what their proposal is, but
And then
we can try and work on that. We can sharpen our pencils a bit and figure out how that,
And then there's also 50% that it could be RV.
yeah, they
from-
could,
From that.
they would have to propose self-storage with 50% RV storage. And then you could, if you were to say no more than 2 within the 1,000 square feet, that would eliminate any more of those from coming in the North Fillmore area.
And if they were just doing self-storage, if they shrunk the lot what went up, it would gain more.
They could go up.
space.
And I have a note to look at the height when you're in the MPD zone. You may even be able to get to 3 stories, but don't quote me on that yet.
3 stories, 33 feet?
Because
You guys are
self-storage,
Putting in elevators and
right. Well, which is, it's,
stairs?
they make them now, yeah. I mean, you have lifts,
On the outside.
yeah, and I don't quote me on that yet, but I think if you have a self-storage compartment, they're not necessarily having to have the same height with attics like you would a commercial building of some sort. You're basically just stacking them, so it's just flat stacks. They're just flats, so you can probably, we'd have to look at it, but you might be able to squeeze 3 stories. We'll look at that. That could maximize that
Their use.
85,000 square feet.
I had a question actually
Yeah.
about the storage or place, the triangle, or the polygon on the corner of, it is a Telegraph and A Street? Is that being used as self-storage, or is it just,
It's being used as storage right now, and there are RVs there.
okay,
But they're not RVs like we're discussing. They're RVs that are being rebuilt.
okay.
So it's a, like,
Restoration.
how you hot rod a car and stuff like that. Currently, it's being used as that, a good portion of it, and they're highly valued, streamlined, refurbished RVs.
But they are using that building to store various things,
Yes.
cars,
Yes.
Hollywood props, et cetera, and then, like I said, some of this stuff's just kind of morphing. We have
Its own
we-
manufacturing
You drive around and you look around and go, what is all this stuff? There's a lot of RVs and various parts of vehicles that are starting to show up out there. So, we did talk a little bit about amending a code related to just simply, open storage. And that might be more of a code enforcement thing where we can kind of look at, what's all this storage and how do we get this stuff cleaned up and have some criteria for that.
Yeah, that particular site's already being processed in that particular way.
Yeah, right,
Yeah, it's already being reviewed for compliance review by the city council.
right.
I like the idea you proposed, because I think on that lot, there's nothing you could build next to it, and then the one above, fire department is down there.
So the planning commissioners are suggesting generally no more than 2 RV storage businesses adjacent or abutting and sharing the same property lines. Something like that, and you can give that particular direction to city staff. We'll craft some language that meets what you're trying to say before we go to the city council and present it to the city council.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I'm just summarizing what I think you're saying.
That sounds fitting.
I think I can review that.
So just to be clear then on going down the road with that a little bit, what the planning commission would be doing then, give me a second, let me find the page here so I can track this. Okay, so I think it's on page 6.
Yeah, so page 6 of 7.
Okay.
And then
So-
up on the top, item 6, subsection 6.040815. Self-storage within 500 feet of Route 146 and within 1,000 feet of another storage facility. So we're talking about addressing this 1,000 feet of another storage facility and saying that there could be 2 self-storage facilities adjacent to each other.
No more than
No
2.
more than
No,
2.
no more than 2.
No more than 2.
And so you'd be eliminating the 1,000-foot requirement?
No, I think it would be no more than 2 within 1,000 feet of another self-storage facility. So you could have two, but after the two, there can't be anything else within 1,000 feet of those two.
If your intent is to just limit it the amount in North Fillmore Civic Plan, that would be correct.
Yeah.
If you were to say no more than two adjacent to each other, then two adjacent to each other could show up one
Yeah,
lot over.
Exactly. So you would have to.
That you could
put the-
leapfrog over. So let's say you have one applicant on those parcels I showed you. They have one, and then they go buy the lot at the other end of the block, and that's their same operation, but they've bought one, you know, one lot over, and they could leapfrog if you just did the adjacent thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if that's your intent, the 1,000 foot would meet that.
So 1,000 feet, keeping the 1,000 foot in there.
Would prevent a leapfrog kind of scenario.
And looking at the map, I don't see where any of these, other than in North Fillmore, would have any room to put it adjacent to it, right?
But those were inquiries that staff received in existing uses, but there might be other parcels that have the zoning that would allow, so that in the future there could be additional areas.
So then can the language be, no more than two from an existing one, and then keep the 1,000 separate, then instead of butting them up?
Okay, so the planning commission's idea is roughly is that two businesses within 1,000 foot radius. That's the concept.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And irrespective of square footage.
That would still apply.
Well, to leave that square footage stuff in there.
So the square foot, so you'd still have to meet all the other square footage requirements, but there'd be not to exceed two businesses in the, okay.
And the 50% would be within those two.
Let's see. Full shirt prohibited.
And that one on the corner is non-conforming, so should it ever cease to exist or do something that makes them, illegal, then it would have to go away, and then that would open up again for potential opportunity there.
Yeah.
For someone to come in and do self-storage plus RV, and then they would clean up the.
Yeah, but I said the advantage would be, it would be a clean corner.
That's the advantage of it being deemed it wouldn't be non-conforming. No, it would be deemed non-conforming under the 85,000 square feet criteria.
Oh, okay, is this bigger than that?
It would be deemed non-conforming at that point. Plus, it doesn't have the self-storage. It just has RV storage. It has RVs. And so by having that other criteria, that one would be non-conforming. And then the goal with the non-conforming ultimately is to get it up to code, or get it up to, beautification, basically. Get some standards built, get some improvements out of it. That's the long-term goal of the city. We may not see it in our lifetime, but that's ultimately what we strive for with these codes.
Well, I agree with that, if you
Yeah.
can, because that is an eyesore.
Yeah, especially when you're going to see single-family homes coming up there. One of the things that, that North Fillmore Civic Plan area has been on the market for a long, long time, I want to say decades even, for single-family home developers. And single-family home developers have passed, a lot of the high-end developers have passed because of the route to get up there. But now you've seen property values go up quite a bit now, and they're starting to look at it. Yeah. But still, the drive-in to get up there is a constraint.
So,
So we need a motion.
yes. Do we have a?
Sorry to do it one more time, just to make sure. I'm clear.
Digressing here.
So would we be saying not more than two within a 1,000 square foot radius, a 1,000 square foot, or not 1,000, 1,000 foot radius? So if you were to draw a circle of 1,000 feet, you could have two, not more.
4,000 feet from the property line, then you can get further.
Yeah, 1,000 feet.
from the property line.
1,000 feet would preclude any additional in the North Fillmore Specific Plan area.
Okay.
Yeah, I drew a radius on 1,000 feet from different parts of the property, and it was covered.
I'm just trying, we don't have to get this nailed down. I just want to make sure I have a clear sense of what the recommendation is to be passing that on. And we'll try to come up with some nailed down language, revise this when it's presented to city council and note the planning commission recommendation.
Okay,
Okay, so how do we do a motion?
have a motion?
Go.
Yeah. All right, so I make a motion that we adopt Planning Commission Resolution 23-1045, recommending the City Council adopt zoning ordinance amendment number 2302 and ordinance number 23-956, amending the Fillmore Municipal Code to clarify existing regulatory requirements and add new regulatory requirements for self-storage and recreational vehicle storage facilities within city limits, and finding of exemption of CEQA, with the additional modified language as discussed for subsection 6.04.0815. Did that cover it?
Yeah, we have, regarding the 1,000.
Yeah, regarding the
radius
1,000
and
feet, and the modified language about adjacent storage facilities.
Okay, I'll second that motion. Good job.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All that oppose? All right, motion passed 4-0. All right, moving on, item 6, business items. Do we have anything there? All right, moving on, 7A, planning community developer report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. I only have one item, and that is that Sonic is now under construction. It'll be under construction from now until the end of spring, maybe early summer. At least that's what they're advertising. You should all know we approved that in 2018, and we approved the construction plans soon after, probably about 2020. So we have been waiting all this time on Sonic to complete or to get started. That's my update.
All right. Moving on to item 7B, the Owen Planning Commission. Brief reports.
I have one observation in the city that I don't know that Bunnen's ever come to the city to ask for a 2-hour parking in front of their thing be posted, or overnight parking, but just about every night, there's this big semis that park in front of their space. And is there any way we could do no overnight parking there, or 2-hour parking?
The city, that's a little complicated. Let's see if I could simplify it, and it won't be too clear. This is a common request for a lot of years. The city installed signs at the entrance of each of the city along the highway that says no RV parking along Highway 126 in specified areas. And we put no parking signs. In front of Bunnen, I'm not sure if we did that because we have to satisfy Caltrans parking requirements. So I'll have to do some further research and get some input from the city engineer and report back to you.
Yeah, because I just see that every night, and I'm thinking, God, if that was my business, I'd be clamoring.
Because it obstructs the view
Of the
to your, right.
Yeah.
So I know the truck parking has been brought up before.
Many
And
times.
I know we had a list of items that we were hoping to get to, and I think that at one point was on the list, so.
We followed up on that. So we ultimately installed the signs that was requested. And if you remember, that was Christopher Hoy's comments. And we installed those signs, and yet I still see the truck parking right there. So I don't do the enforcement on the parking, and so it's really debatable who does it. I'm not sure. Excuse me. So I don't know if it's a CHP, or if it's the city, or if it's Caltrans. So this question deserves an answer, but you're not going to get a simple one. It's a simple question, that's a difficult answer. I can report, I'll send you an email from the city attorney, city engineer.
All right, any other items?
I had a question about Papa Lupez. Are they planned to open anytime soon?
We have no idea. They're approved.
Yeah.
They have certificate of occupancy.
We gave them a COO a long time ago.
That's what I
And-
recall.
Yeah. And we don't know what happened.
Okay.
But it's worth a call to find out if he's opening anytime soon.
Yeah, the ball's not in
Because
our court. We've done everything.
Yeah. I mean, they do expire at some point if it's if it's a use that hasn't taken a hold. We might have to look at that and let him know, hey, you're running the risk of expiration, so, get open as quickly as possible.
It's very similar to the project next to Bunnan, the 970 Ventura Street. We approved that building, and it was constructed, and it sat empty for nearly 15 years. It's now approved for Tri-County Health, so, I mean, it sat there for years and years and years. We did everything we can to expedite it, but Lupe's is the same position.
Somebody had mentioned that Chipotle was going in next to AT&T, the new AT&T store. Is that a rumor, or is that true?
I heard that was maybe a social media thing.
I've been telling everybody, yeah, I heard they're coming there, and then I had somebody go, I think somebody just posted it on social media, and it took hold.
It's a good question because it was rumored.
nothing.
It was rumored that Sonic was just a rumor too, but that actually became true.
Well, that-
But Chipotle really is just a rumor.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as we know, we haven't
Okay, good.
gotten one call about that.
How about, Red Engine? Are they-
That's a good question. They are requesting certificate of occupancy. They're nearing completion.
Great.
And we're going through our punch lists. They'll get a list of corrections that they need to make. So they're close.
Okay.
They'll need to make some corrections and some improvements, but they're very, very close.
Are they making beer now?
They're testing. They have to test all the equipment, so they are manufacturing beer for their self-consumption or testing for
That's part of
themselves.
testing, taste test.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or at a fundraiser where their beer was being given away?
It's
Okay.
dicey.
They
It's
could
dicey because when we process this, you're in the commercial highway zone. We have this discussion a lot. Even tonight, the commercial highway zone is for commercial, and you have to have a restaurant. So you don't do manufacturing in the commercial zone. You do manufacturing in the industrial zone, and so that's one of the things that we say. Hey, you can't manufacture for too long. You can't be taste testing for too long. You got to open up a restaurant because you're on the highway. We require a restaurant, and we require food to be served where you're serving alcohol. But
They're going to meet all of those things.
yes, and a lot of times rents don't kick in. The property owners don't require rent until they're getting ready to open. And so you can see where, there may not be motivation to get open as quickly as possible if you're not having to pay rent. I'm not saying that's the case here, but we do see that happen.
Any other comments, questions? All right, moving on. Item 8, Planning Commission adjourns to the Planning Commission regular meeting scheduled for November 15th, 2023 at 6:30 in City Council Chambers, 250 Central Avenue, Fillmore, California.